Welcome to the God's Word News Service with your host, Bishop Gregory.
Good evening. Once again, I'm Bishop Gregory, and I want to welcome you to the God's Word News Service, the Bishop's Report. By now, I'm sure that everyone with the capacity to think realizes that the United States of America is far less united than most of us remember, and we are on a downhill slide morally, spiritually, ethically, and every other way possible. And the majority of Americans have no idea why. Have any of you ever had the uneasy feeling that something isn't quite right, that things aren't exactly what they appear to be, but you just cannot put your finger on it? The reason is they see America through a glass darkly. Many will not like what I'm going to say, but I am not here to tickle anyone's ears or to stroke anybody's inflated or fragile egos. Rather, I'm here to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, like it or not. Let's get one thing clear. What ex-officer Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd was nothing short of murder. Mr. Floyd was handcuffed behind his back, and that is where it should have ended, since he was restrained and no longer a threat to anyone. He should have been immediately placed into a police car and driven to the police department. There was no need and no excuse for Chauvin to have put George Floyd on the ground and then kneel on his neck for over 8 minutes until Mr. Floyd died. Those other officers who just stood around and never made any attempt to pull Chauvin off of the victim are, in my estimation, guilty of aiding and abetting in the murder of Mr. Floyd. Because, as supposedly trained police officers, they should have known that what Derek Chauvin was doing was wrong on so many levels. But that does not excuse what the protesters did and are doing to our cities across the nation, looting, burning down places of business of people who had absolutely nothing to do with Mr. Floyd's death. It is not the way to seek a redress of grievances. How many more times do you think that American taxpayers are going to continue being used as the government's piggy bank to pay to repair and rebuild the damages done by out-of-control mobs before they rise up and go after the mobs with their constitutional Second Amendment right? Is that what we want? The problem is that the young people of today have been purposely dumbed down, brainwashed, blinded, and hoodwinked as to the real history of the United States. And this brainwashing, dumbing down, and blinding took place starting in the universities and colleges right here in America when the leftists took control over the education system, where the leftist professors drilled out-and-out lies and half-truths about America's history. When those who graduated from these universities and colleges became teachers and educators, they brought all of the brainwashing and indoctrination that was drilled into them into our high schools, middle schools, and now into our grade schools and kindergartens. Why do you think our education departments keep pushing early childhood education? It has absolutely nothing to do with the education of our children. but everything to do with indoctrinating men to accept socialism. And the earlier the leftists can start manipulating young children to not just accept and embrace socialism, but also to accept as normal all sorts of immorality, to drive any sense of the belief in God out of them. Why else do the schools push the LGBT agenda in our schools at an early age, along with the transvestite story hours that are held in our public libraries and in many school libraries for children as young as 5 years old? The mass media is also involved in all of the brainwashing and indoctrination. Every mainstream news media all spill out the same lies, the same BS day in and day out. It makes no difference if you are listening to ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, etc. You hear the exact same lies, all using the exact same words and phrases. And anyone who still has control over their own thought processes knows that each of the talking heads are all reading from the same script. And it all comes down to the same line of BS. Trump lies. Trump is unfit for the office of president. Trump wants to be a dictator. Trump is mentally ill. Trump is working for the Russians. And on it goes. However, if people took the time to open their eyes and see what is really happening, they will see that everything that they are accusing President Trump of, and those who support him, is exactly what the Democrats themselves are doing. No matter what President Trump does, no matter how hard he tries to make things better for all Americans, those on the left belittle him and accuse him of having ulterior motives and accusing him of dividing America. The truth is, when Barack Obama usurped the office of president, he did nothing for America or the American people. He set race relations back 50 years. He pitted men against women, blacks against whites, straights against homosexuals, and so on. No matter what President Trump does or might do to better the lives of the American people, the Democrats will invent something to make Trump look like a liar. If Trump walked on water across the Potomac River, the left would accuse him of not knowing how to swim. What the majority of American citizens, and this includes those we elect to public office, teachers, lawyers, including so-called constitutional law experts, judges, and many more, lack is any knowledge of the Constitution, because they have purposely been kept ignorant. Thus, for all practical purposes, the Constitution no longer exists. It is dead. For a number of years now, we have only been living under the illusion of freedom. We all believe that we have the right of freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the right to keep and bear arms, etc. The only place these rights and freedoms exist today is on paper and in our minds. Reality portrays an entirely different picture. Do you need proof? If so, here it is. How about all the houses of worship that were forced to shut down by dictatorial governors and mayors using the COVID-19 virus as an excuse to do so, and then threatening to arrest priests, ministers, or other religious leaders if they did not comply, then telling the religious leaders that they can reopen their churches, but they have to agree to run the religious services according to the dictates of the governors and mayors. All of this in violation of the First Amendment. What about all the gun shops that were forced to shut down because leftist governors and mayors, drunk on their perceived new tyrannical powers, deemed gun shops to be non essential in violation of the Second Amendment? Have you ever walked down a street in a park, entered a store, or any public place and noticed all of the surveillance cameras that were installed by local, state, and federal governments to track our every move? They are all in violation of the Fourth Amendment, and there are many more examples of how our rights and freedoms have been eroded and completely eradicated. Yet, you will never hear any of this in the mainstream media. As we go about our daily lives, few of us realize that we are being manipulated like puppets on a string, never realizing that the puppet masters are our own local, state, and federal governments, and even big banks and business corporations, because what we think we see is not reality. So what is the truth? While the government controls your education through the leftist education system, your daily needs during hard times through welfare, Medicaid, and Medicare, your health care through the takeover of the health care system, your land through property taxes, the state and local governments by using the COVID-19 epidemic as an excuse, are even controlling where, when, and how you can practice your religion. Yes, the government controls you, your behavior, your habits, even your life itself. Even whether you live or die is under government control, just by passing laws or issuing bureaucratic edicts. Your Social Security number is one of the main ways you are being manipulated and controlled. For those of you who are too young to remember, from the 1930s up to the 1960s, Americans were required to apply for Social Security when they got their first job. And it was stated right on the Social Security card, quote, "This card is not to be used for identification purposes," end of quote. Now, every American citizen is by law issued a Social Security number when they are born. And we cannot do any kind of business without having to divulge our Social Security numbers for identification purposes. Even our private health insurance records are entered into some government computer database stored in a cloud somewhere, subject to scrutiny by the government, the IRS, and even health insurance companies. We cannot even travel anywhere today by plane, train, or bus or ship without producing on demand our Social Security number and or some form of government picture ID, which makes us ever more dependent on the government. We are also forced to undergo humiliating pat-downs and being poked, groped, goosed, and felt up by the government police agents at all of our nation's airports for so-called national security. How much longer will it be before we are mandated by our government to have RFID tracking chips injected under our skin for further identification, treating us like animals? It should set off alarm bells in your brain whenever any government entity announces that they are about to enact some new surveillance and control program, quote, "for our safety," end of quote. Because the government has a history of punishing law-abiding citizens by enacting new laws that restrict more and more of our freedom by telling us that it is for our own good or our own safety. But one has to ask themselves, if the government is so concerned about our health and safety, then how come they release thousands of prisoners from jail to run loose because of the virus, and looters and arsonists are never arrested or even seldom prosecuted. Most, if not all, of the draconian laws enacted in America are done so by the Democrats. A few of the Democrats claim that they are not socialists, while other Democrats proudly proclaim that the Democrat Party is now the Democrat Socialist Party. The official stance of the Democrat Party today is their embrace of every aspect of socialism, which is a direct threat to the rights and freedoms of every American and to everything that made us American. As the young people of today are being blindly led down the path to utter destruction by believing the lies that are being spoon-fed on a daily basis by the leftist Democrats and backed up by the fake news mass media. Those with ears to hear and eyes to see know that the Democrats of today, the new Democrat socialists, have made it abundantly clear that their aims are to destroy the free America that most of us love, the America we grew up in. They are dead set on implementing their so-called Green New Deal, which would eliminate cars, planes, all fossil fuels. They want to get rid of beef, dictate the size of sodas that can be sold in stores and restaurants, eliminate private property ownership, and they are dead set on placing our health care and economic systems under complete government control, and ultimately to eradicate the Constitution and all of the constitutional freedoms America was founded on. It should be obvious to one and all just what is at stake when every single one of the Democrat candidates for the office of president raised their hands proudly in their support to provide free health care for illegal immigrants, an act that would help put the final nail in the coffin of America's financial system. The left's insanity shows no signs of slowing down as they push to decriminalize illegal immigration, get rid of ICE and border guards, eliminating all private health insurance companies, and the push to drastically raise taxes on the middle class. The leader of the Socialist Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is the brains behind the Green New Deal. Her chief of staff recently admitted that the main effort of the Green New Deal is to utterly destroy the economy of the United States as we know it and endow the federal government with the absolute power to control basic choices such as what food you can eat, how much, and what house you can live in. Our problem with socialism and communism goes far beyond the four-member squad of radical socialists controlling the U.S. House of Representatives, because they are not a squad. They are a full-on Red Army. Have any of you noticed how all of the states with the most draconian shutdown orders and social distancing laws are all Democrat-controlled states and cities? The same holds true with the rioting and destruction of property. The worst of the riots are in all of the Democrat-controlled states and cities. All of this is more like a dress rehearsal of what the Democrat socialists have planned for the rest of us Americans. I even believe that all of the coronavirus lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, wearing masks in public, etc., is all to acclimate the people to following orders, doing exactly as they are told. I could be wrong, but somehow I just don't think so. From day one, when the coronavirus swept into the United States, the Socialist Democrat leaders in this nation reacted by politicizing the virus and using it as a means of extortion, never really showing any concern for American workers and all the American citizens. All they cared about was pushing their left-wing agenda to support their party. Don't believe it? Think back a few weeks back when the Democrats controlling the U.S. House decided to go home for a week to 10 days as the Republican-controlled Senate stayed in Washington working on a Trump-supported virus rescue bill that would assist American workers and businesses against damages caused by the virus. It was all set to go with bipartisan support, but Nancy Pelosi decided to hot-tail it back to Washington. When she arrived, she immediately set about convincing the Democrats that they could get more goodies and more of their pet programs in the virus relief bill. So using extortion and blackmail to block the bill, to push an agenda, she destroyed the Senate bill and attempted to fund a bunch of pure garbage that had absolutely nothing to do with the virus or the American people and their jobs. Here's what Speaker of the House Pelosi, Senator Chuck Schumer, a Democrat of New York, and many other Democrat socialist traitors wanted in the final bill. Additional funding for the Kennedy Art Center in Washington. Required early voting. Required same-day voter registration. When Dana Bush asked Pelosi if Nancy thinks President Trump could reopen the U.S. economy in a couple of weeks, Pelosi went into a rage screaming, "I don't care, I don't care, I don't care," just like a little kid having a tantrum. It is obvious that Pelosi doesn't care that millions will lose their jobs. She doesn't give a hoot about the economy or America itself. While millions of Americans were losing their jobs and wondering how they were going to pay their rent and feed their families, Pelosi brazenly showed off her two over $2,000 refrigerator freezers stocked full of $14 a pint ice cream. The only other thing she cares about are her Botox injections and expensive wines and liquors. And while this was going on, Chuck Schumer couldn't race fast enough to get back to the floor of the Senate to spew his usual lies and misinformation, telling Americans that the rescue bill was nothing more than a buyout for big corporations and Trump's corporate pals. All lies. What the young people today don't seem to know, remember, or care that socialism, communism has failed wherever it came into existence. It is not the utopian paradise that leftists keep promising. Instead, it has brought nothing but misery, slavery, poverty, and death. Just read the real history of Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, and the Soviet satellite countries under Joseph Stalin. China in the past under Mao Zedong, and the present-day communist regime. North Korea under Little Kim, Venezuela under Maduro, and Cuba under Castro. When you can see the world as it really is, you will not be able to deny the fact that every country that has fallen to socialism has all ended up in tyranny and mass arrests of all those who even voiced their opposition to socialism, torture, and wholesale genocide. And there's absolutely no reason to believe that it will never happen here. It all starts with gun confiscation, making it impossible for citizens to protect themselves. Then free speech is next to go, which prevents anyone from organizing and criticizing against the government, which could lead to possible uprising. Then churches are shut down and banned, with priests, ministers, rabbis, and other religious leaders being arrested and hauled off to harsh labor camps if they aren't out and out tortured and executed. Democrats love to argue that socialism isn't communism. But what they don't tell you is that socialism is the gateway to communism. And once socialism takes hold, it can never be gotten rid of. It is truly sad that so many Americans have fallen prey to the socialist ideology that strives to deprive them of freedom, destroy capitalism, reinvent our founding, and rally behind nonsense like man-made global warming and gun control. Those who desire socialism are generally those who are lazy and envious of those who worked hard and earned the things they have. Those who desire socialism are those who desire government to take care of their every need from cradle to grave, to think for them and punish those who have more than they do. Social justice means we will be sharing equally in scarcity and misery. As parents, how many of you would sit your children down and tell them their world is going to end in 12 years and they will all be dead? Would you? Yet, this is exactly what our children are being taught in our schools and universities. Can you understand now why so many young people today are suicidal? Children and young people need to look forward to their future, their goals, their dreams, and enjoy their youth, not told they are going to die in 12 years by poop-for-brain liberals and communists who have taken control of our education system. Whenever there is a shooting, the Democrats blame law-abiding gun owners, the Second Amendment, and the NRA. The Second Amendment isn't about deer hunting, target shooting, or gun collecting. It is about having weapons to defend our country, our community, our homes, and ourselves against tyranny, even if that tyranny comes from our own government. Socialism is a control system and not compatible with an armed citizenry. That's the real reason they want your guns. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever. By operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure our plans. And if by accident one or two figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and pledges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur. And in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this against America. This statement that I just read was made by Edward Mandell House. Edward Mandell House was the foreign relations advisor to President Woodrow Wilson. And it describes the actual condition that all Americans find themselves in today, and is a true reflection of the devious and corrupt mindset of those Democrats holding power in the government, who are dead set on absolute control over all the people. And it should scare the hell out of everyone. The only people in America who think that the Democrats are their friend are those Americans who are living off the sweat, blood, and tears of productive Americans, sanctioned by government. The rest of us would just like to be left alone to live our lives, raise our children, perhaps to take a vacation every now and then, without government scooping off huge percentages of our money in taxes, peeking into our bedrooms and regulating us to death. The Democrats tend to forget that it took far less regulations and control to trigger the Revolutionary War than what Americans are facing today. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, also known as Lenin, once said the following: "A lie told often enough becomes the truth. The goal of socialism is communism." Now, all those who cannot see that they are being duped, that cannot see that they are being used and set up by the left, are the ones who see the world through a glass darkly. And they had better clean that glass quickly before it's too late. Thank you for watching. God bless you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.